All right, welcome to Tuesdays with Jakey. Here we are with another episode. It is Tuesday, May 25th, or something like that. Um, and it has been rainy and cold up here in Macomb, Idaho. For the past week, it was up in the 70s for a while, and then it went down to the 50s in the daytime, down low 30s in the night, and it's a good thing. I haven't tossed away the wood from my wood burning stove, but I went out for a long walk in the woods today. 2.5 hours in the rain in the woods, and I have muddy shoes, but it was rad. I heard last year I got here like towards the end of June. I don't remember the exact day. I left New York City on June 15th, flew to get my motorcycle, rode around for a week or so. So I probably got here like June 23rd, 24th, something like that. And it was really nice out. But my friends told me that they actually sent me a video June 7th. They got 8 inches of snow up here. So I have no idea what to expect over the next couple of weeks. I'm hoping it's going to be nice because I have my motorcycle here and I want to ride. But, there'll be plenty of time for riding when riding season's good, right? There'll be plenty of time for counting when the dealing's done, as Kenny Rogers said. I am on video once again. If you like listening to this podcast, well, then keep on listening to it. But if you want to see me chatting, you can do that on YouTube. YouTube.com/Tuesdays with Jakey. No, that's not it. Type my name in, I guess. I guess I'll post it on my Twitter, which I think I'm going to cancel my Twitter. I'm going to deactivate it at least. With Twitter, you can deactivate for 30 days, but I've just been thinking a lot about things I post and things I see. And things I see on Facebook isn't too much. I don't look at Facebook much. I find that most people who are still super active on Facebook are moderately retarded. And I've done a good job like unfollowing. I have like 4,000 something friends because back in the day I used to just accept every friend request. So I have so many people that I don't even know in real life. Maybe some of you out there listen, I hope I didn't offend anybody. But I don't like Facebook is full of like a lot of just crap. Instagram I love. I just give me a picture, man. Let me see what's up. And Twitter I find that the stuff I'm reading, it just completely becomes political stuff and stuff that doesn't excite me. Like back when I got out of the nut house, which was 18 months ago this past Saturday, actually. I got out of there December 22nd, 2019. So May 22nd, 2021 was 18 months later. But one of the first things I did when I got home was go through my social media accounts and I unfollowed everything that didn't bring me joy. I unfollowed a lot of people on Facebook, or at least I hid them, right? I didn't want to unfriend them. And then I just full on unfollowed a lot of people on Instagram. And I got the number of people I followed like under 500, and it's pretty much stayed there. And I also unfollowed a lot of people on Twitter because I was just sick of seeing. I didn't want to see like anything, like I said, that didn't bring me joy. But Twitter, I go there for news. And not even political news. I unfollowed most political accounts, but I just keep refollowing some, especially the, like, I don't know, super left wing stuff I like. I think I like, because I agree with a lot of points they make, obviously, and not all. I was talking to a buddy earlier. I think I'm no wing. No wing or both wing. I'd say no wing. Not right wing, not left wing. Just like, I just got my own ideas, man. I've talked about this in the past on the podcast, but, people are people, man, and people just want the same thing out of life for the most part. They want to hang out. They want a job that pays well, that helps them pay their bills. They want their kids to be safe. They want freedom of speech, whatever that means to different people. They want freedom of religion. The things that America is founded as a free country, right? And you think about like, what are those freedoms? Really, it's really the freedom to hang out, the freedom to grill meat, the freedom to drive your car wherever you want to go without being stopped by anybody at checkpoints or any sort of weird border patrols, and the freedom to be free from tyranny, however you define that, right? Like some people think the cops are tyrannical, and maybe they are for a lot of people, but I think people just want the freedom to like exist more than anything, and most of us have that. And the things we're not free from, which is negativity, are things that we hold ourselves in a prison of our own making for, right? Like with social media. Most of the shit that pisses us off is things that's manufactured by the media. You think about media companies, they only exist to sell advertising, right? I can't find a straight up just unbiased news source. I've tried a bunch of things. I tried following Al Jazeera for a while to get their take on things, and obviously their take on things and the American mainstream media are very different, but the truth obviously lies somewhere in between all of these things. You know, there's Fox News and then there's CNN, both of which are horseshit, I think, and both are obviously always reporting the opposite of what the other one's reporting. So I think it's going to be time to just kill my Twitter because I've unfollowed or hidden enough stuff on Facebook, and people tend to not get political on Instagram. And I gotta say, I love TikTok. TikTok is a good thing for me when I want to mindlessly scroll. And I found that TikTok does a really good job of curating based on what you've liked. I've never posted a TikTok, and I don't rarely ever comment, but I just hit click like on things that I like, and mostly that turns into like hot chicks, shit that's super funny, skateboard videos, motocross videos, and cooking videos. And then it just keeps showing me more of that, which I love. And then I get ads from, especially this company called Acorn. I haven't figured out how to tell TikTok I don't like something other than swipe off of it really quickly, but it just keeps telling me about Acorn. Like, motherfucker, no, I don't want to fucking invest the change of every purchase I make because, like, I want that money, man. I don't want to invest my money in something I don't know anything about. I certainly don't want to invest my money in cryptocurrency. I guess Bitcoin fell to like $32,000 a coin this week, which is a little bit of phooey in the face of everybody who's like, you got to invest in Bitcoin, man, and Dogecoin and all that bullshit. Investing is just, that's also weird to me in general. Like, I had a good discussion with a buddy last week about, he was trying to invest money and where do I invest? And I was like, man, just, you know, if you have extra money, pay down the mortgage of your house or invest in some fucking really safe mutual fund and leave it there forever. He was telling me he put like $5,000 in a mutual fund last year and then it went up to 7,000, then it went down to 4,500, and I'm like, dude, that's just shit like retirement accounts. You just put it there and leave it there for 20 years and apparently it will grow. But yeah, Twitter is just like it's just kind of a cesspool, and I used to use it to follow comedians, but I unfollowed most of them because they had gotten super political. And I have two Twitter accounts. I have one for myself and I have one for the Rusty Cage, my MMA podcast. If you like mixed martial arts and UFC fighting, you should look up the Rusty Cage podcast. I do that with my partner. I go by Rusty Jake, my partner David Cage, also known as David Castillo, also known as Confines World. He's co-owner and music booker of St. Vitus. But I have that Twitter account, and that's just exclusively MMA. And it's like, anything else I need to know about, I guess I could just like look up on the internet, right? Like, why do I need Twitter telling me where to go? Like, for every cool music video I discover on Twitter, I see 100 other things that I wish I didn't see. They're just fucking nonsense for the most part. So I'm going to deactivate my account. I'll have 30 days to bring it back up if I want it. And really the only reason to just not delete it completely is because I think that there's some sort of inherent value to having the handle at Jake Rocks Off. But like, I don't know, who follows me on there? Who cares? Like, they'll follow me again or they won't. Or like, what's it fucking matter? Because none of it's real life. I got plenty of friends that I text with who send me weird links and shit like that. So yeah, that's what's happening this week. Yeah, it's fucking cold, man. But I mean, it's part of the trade-off. It's cold, but I went out for a walk in the woods, and even in the cold, the woods are fucking beautiful. So, music business. There's been some developments in the music business this week, and I'll talk about them a little bit because it seems to be that's something I talk about a lot on this podcast since our award-winning episode where I had Diamond David Hoffman on the podcast, or Disco David Hoffman, or Dashing David Hoffman. I think that's what he should go by because he is a handsome motherfucker. But yeah, so I put 2 shows on sale the week before last, and they were not new show bookings that I made. They were bookings that I had carried over from the 2020 season that we had put up and on sale. Typically what I do every year is I work from January till whenever, and I just work on booking shows and taking holds and making offers and making all the deals and trying to confirm shows. And a lot of times I'll put a lot of shows on sale at once, but for certain bands that I've worked with forever, we'll just kind of put the show up on sale in February if that's when we confirm it. But usually around the beginning of April is when we announce and put on sale a lot of our big shows or a lot of our shows. We try to make a splash, like, hey, this season on the Rock Soft Concert Cruise, here's these 50 fucking shows. Which I guess is a good thing for marketing, to try to market a bunch of stuff all at once, which saved me a lot of hassle during when the pandemic hit in 2020 because we didn't have a lot of stuff announced or on sale yet. We were prepping it all for announcing on sale, so I didn't have to cancel much or refund much or offer people refunds or move things. We just said all those shows I had worked on. We said, well, we'll see what happens. We'll take it day by day, and obviously none of that stuff got announced. But the two shows that I rescheduled from last year. There was like Ship of Fools, which is a yearly Grateful Dead tribute band we do. That was one. I'm not even counting that, but the two original bands we did, we had one in July, one in October. And those shows, we sort of re-announced them. They had been on sale since we had initially put them on sale. And obviously when the pandemic hit, those stopped selling tickets, but we just moved them to future dates. And the one in July is only on sale and announced now because I think it's probably too early. That's been my gut, but the band is doing a whole tour. It's a band called Electric Six. They're doing a whole tour of the Northeast, so that's one of those dates. So we had actually rescheduled that like last April. They were like, we'll just push everything to the following July because it was supposed to be in July of 2020. We just moved it to July of 21. And the other one is the Pie Tasters, who they were supposed to be playing in June of 2020. We moved that to June of 2021. And then somewhat recently, we moved that to October because we figure October is going to be much safer. So we kind of re-announced both of those shows. And the Electric Six show sold like 6 tickets in the first 2 days. And the Pie Taster show, we sold 40 tickets. And I can only chalk that up to one thing because both bands are equally popular. If you just go by ticket sales for past cruises, you'd say Electric Six is more popular because they usually play a bigger boat and sell more tickets than the Pie Tasters. But what happened was we barely sold any for Electric Six. And the only conclusion I can come to from that on these like little test cases that I have is that the public also agreed that July was too soon. And I think people were just like, I'll take a more wait and see attitude because I'm trying to figure out what people's appetite is going to be for going back to shows and events. And I've been having a lot of discussions about it over the past couple of weeks with both my own friends and people in the music business. And the phrase that came out of my mouth one day that I just keep referring back to is that I think a lot of people are seeking connection over stimulation. So I think people want to get back to real life right away, but I think they want connection. People want to get back together with their friends and go out to a dinner and be able to hug their friends and sit and talk to people, right? And be in person again with their friends that they haven't seen in forever. And they're not necessarily craving stimulation, meaning you don't need to go to a huge event. You don't need to go to a concert where you're going to be packed in with people. I think a lot of people are finding that there's going to be anxiety associated with those types of activities, which I totally understand. And I'm certainly feeling that way right now. I'm really excited to be seeing some friends. I'm going to see some next week. I'm going to see a bunch of people I haven't seen in a long time, and I'm excited about that. But I'm way more excited about that than I am the idea of going to a big concert. And I know Irving Plaza put like 55 shows on sale last week. I'm not sure how those went. And it would be a little tricky to even judge based on a lot of the stuff that they put on sale because honestly, like, they didn't put up a lot of great shows. So I don't think anything that they put up other than, say, the Struts are things that were expected to sell out immediately. There was no real blockbuster announcements. But then there have been some other big announcements, like the Bowery Presents announced Brandy Carlisle. They announced Wilco, both at the Forest Hills Tennis Stadium, run by Mr. Mike Luba. What's up? And I think those will probably sell really well, but those are also outdoor shows. Like, I don't think boats have a lot of outdoor area, but I don't think anyone confuses a boat with being an outdoor show. And from when the pandemic started, I got super nervous, even when it looked like we would be able to put on shows later in the season, when it still looked like that was a possibility. I was very nervous because there was all that talk when the pandemic started about cruise ships and about people being stuck on cruise ships and getting COVID. And I got to say right now, like, I wouldn't want to get on a boat. And if we do that show in July, I'm not going to be there. I'm not going to go on it. If I lived in New York, maybe I would. But I'm certainly not going to fly back from McCollum, Idaho for that. But even if I was in New York, I don't think I'd want to get on a boat that quickly. But obviously, I won't know that because it's May 25th, and there's a lot of time between May 25th and July 17th. And like every day seems to bring new information and new feelings. So I'm not sure what's going to happen. But the way the ticket sales went, it leads me to believe that people feel like July might be a little too early to go do something like that. So we'll see. We'll see how it develops. And I probably shouldn't publicly be talking about bands' ticket sales. And if anyone from either of those bands is listening to this podcast and you're upset about it, well, then, go use another promoter next time. Because, I'm an open book, and I have been with a lot of things on this podcast, and I think that's what people enjoy. So I'm just going to tell the truth. I'm going to tell my truth. And I've been talking to a lot of people about shows, and I actually found out that there was a lot of shady business going on this week. And a lot of shady business and a lot of fuck ups with a lot of on sales. I talked on here about ticket rebates and about how the service charge you pay for tickets, a big portion of that goes back to the concert promoters. And if you haven't listened to those episodes really quickly, Ticketmaster, TicketWeb, Eventbrite, they all have a set fee that they charge per ticket. And it's a set fee. You've always paid more than that, though, even if you don't know it. So say, for example, a $30 ticket on the Rocks Off cruise would be a $4.50 service charge. I can set that service charge to anything I want above $4.50, and I get kicked back the difference. And that happens on a lot of different levels. Some people jack their service charges way up. They add an extra $10 on it, so you'd be paying a $14.50 charge, or they jack $6 up. And it's a game promoters have played forever, and agents have just kind of been like, well, we're okay with that. We know what's going on. Wink, wink. If you ever see a facility fee listed on your ticket, that's just straight up a kickback that goes to maintaining the facility. That was something that was invented in the 80s that was for old theaters, and it was done under the auspices of, if we're bringing rock shows out of these old theaters that are falling apart a little, we're going to charge $2 or $1 facility fee, and that money was supposed to go back to the owner of the theater to help maintain and do upgrades to the theater. I don't know if that was true in the 80s because I wasn't booking shows then, but what did start happening was the promoters were pocketing that, especially when the promoters became the owners of these theaters. And then the facility fee has gone up to $2 to $3, and in some cases it might actually go to the owner or operator of the venue, but for the most part it's just another kickback that the promoter can get and not add that fee into the gross of the ticket. And the gross of the ticket, which is the price that you see on your ticket, that's what the promoter and the artist and the agent and the artist's managers make their deal on. So if your ticket says $2 plus a $20 ticket, plus a $2 facility fee, plus a $6 service charge, the act is only seeing a cut of that $20. The rest goes to the promoter. And I heard that there were a couple of promoters, probably way more than a couple, that had jacked up their service charges by $10 or $12 above what the regular service charge was. And I was talking to a rep for one band that called the agent out on it, only because, I've also talked on here, like, agents they get the deal done and they move along, and I understand that they got a lot of deals to get done, but agents don't sit around and go and look to see what the service charge is after the fact that put the shows on sale. So someone bought a ticket. She was the cousin of one of the performers, and she bought a ticket because she didn't want to bug her cousin to be on the guest list. And then she was like, this fucking charge is outrageous. It was a $14.50 service charge on a $25 ticket. So you're looking at more than 50%. And she called the artist called the manager called the agent called the promoter. And what ended up happening is they're going to be refunding the people. They agreed that they raised it $5 above what it was last year, just because that was a way that they were going to try to make up some of this money from the pandemic. And now those people who bought those tickets are going to be getting refunded. But I wouldn't be surprised now to see that every offer you send into an agent is going to have to also list what the service charge is per ticket. And I think that's a smart thing, obviously, because there should be more transparency and less opacity in concert tickets. And Another thing about concert tickets is there's this technology called blockchain that's what they're using now for NFTs, and the idea is that if you buy an NFT, then you resell it. The person who originally created it will share in that resale money. And there was a ticketing company called Big Neon. I actually have a tattoo of them on the back of my arm. It was a fundraiser. I guess I got to say that, right? Like, I got Peter Shapiro and Karina Reichman's face tattooed on me to raise money for Headcount, an organization that raises money, an organization that helps register people to vote at concerts. And Headcount was doing a spelling bee at the Brooklyn Bowl. And I had been in the spelling bee the previous year and raised a few $1,000s through my involvement through social media. And the following year, they weren't doing any repeats. So not the same people couldn't be in the spelling bee again. And my friend Lucy Beach hit me up and was like, hey, let's try to figure out a way to raise money. And we came up with the idea that I would get a tattoo of the winner of the spelling bee and Peter Shapiro on my back. I got it right back here. If you want to scroll through my Instagram back to May 2019 or June or July, the spelling bee was in May. I think I didn't get the tattoo till July. But Karina Reichman, longtime Rocksoft employee, one of my best friends, she ended up winning the spelling bee, and I was so happy because I was like, oh, getting a tattoo of Karina and Shapiro is no big deal. And then Big Neon, the ticketing company, they donated $1,000 if I would add their logo to the tattoo, and all that money went to Headcount, and we ended up raising like $5,000 for Headcount just from that silly tattoo. But Big Neon was trying to do blockchain ticketing, and what that would do would be you buy a ticket to see Bon Jovi for $100, then you sell it for $200. Well, Bon Jovi and the promoter of that event get a cut of that $100 profit that you made on that ticket because blockchain traces the ticket, and you always know who owned it first, and you can trace the ticket and how many times it's been sold. And they did not have a lot of success getting traction in the ticketing world because most promoters, a lot of them sell tickets out the back door, sell tickets directly to ticket scalpers and what do they call them, resale agents, or they put them up on StubHub and shit like that themselves. And so most of the bigger promoters do not want you to know where the ticket's been and how many times it's been sold and resold. So they didn't have a lot of traction there. But I think that's something we're going to see in the future. I think blockchain is especially valuable to the ticket market, but it's going to kind of upend a lot of the people's profit centers in concerts. So it's going to be a big disruptor, as they say in the technology industry. So yeah, but there was a lot of surprises in this past week, and then there were a lot of issues with ticket servers going down from different ticket companies. I know Tickets Today had a big problem because they were putting so many shows on sale. Everybody there was this rush, and I was part of it. You know, when Governor's Ball announced 2 weeks ago that they were coming back and they were going to do their on sale, I think that was one of the beacons to let the rest of the people in the concert business, especially in New York, know, hey, we should start putting some shows on sale because we don't want to lose out, right? People only have so much money to spend on their tickets. We want to be part of that gold rush. And there was the assumption that as soon as you put something on sale, it was going to sell like hotcakes because people were dying to buy tickets. And it turned out from a lot of people I've talked to that wasn't necessarily the case. A lot of people put a lot of shows up, and then a lot of stuff did okay, or actually somewhat underwhelming. And I think that goes back to people not being ready right now to commit money to something in September, October, November, December that may or may not happen. And obviously, if it's a really hot show, you're going to move the tickets for it. But if it's stuff that like people just kind of want to see, they're not going to be running and jumping their way into a Ticketmaster queue to buy those tickets. So we'll see how the summer develops. And like, it's not even summer yet, man. You know, Memorial Day is this coming weekend, and that's sort of the unofficial or almost official kickoff to the summer, right? It's the official kickoff to the summer in that it's the first holiday weekend. Obviously, summer doesn't start until June 21st or 22nd when the equinox happens, but by then everybody's in full-on summer mode. Man, I can't believe kids are going to be in school till then. Like, yo, school should end before Memorial Day and start after Labor Day. I don't know, when did it happen that fucking kids were going back to school in August? Man, that's criminal. I would stage a strike if I was a student. Students should have more strikes. They should have more power, right? Fuck whether or not the teachers want to go in. Like, kids should be like, I'm not fucking doing it. Like, no, thank you. I mean, I staged so many strikes in ninth and 10th grade. In fact, I had to repeat 10th grade because I skipped so many days of school. At a certain point after Christmas, I had a meeting with my guidance counselor. My guidance counselor said, you've missed so many days and failed so many classes because of that already in the first half of the year that no matter what happens, you're not going to pass this year. So you're going to have to go to summer school. And I was like, well, it's good you tell me now because I'm just going to drop out, which is what I did my first time around in 10th grade. I dropped out and I was working nights at a gas station. Yeah, one of those gas stations where you actually get to pump the gas yourself. So I just picked up the day shift and then I got a night shift at McDonald's. So that was 10th grade. First time around was a good year. And then I did my summer school and I got my 4 classes. I did 2 in the early session of summer school and 2 in the late. And then I came back and I fucked off a bunch of classes second time around in 10th grade, but I passed the year, no problem, because I had the summer school credits. Can you imagine telling a kid in 10th grade, like, no matter what you do, you're not going to pass this year? I was like, well, why fucking bother trying? I was still scratching my head over that one. So I guess that's what's going on this week. And I'll tell you what should be going on this week and is not is the Isle of Man races. It's called the Isle of Man TT. It's a motorcycle race. The TT stands for Tourist Trophy, and it's been going on for over 100 years on the Isle of Man. The Isle of Man is a small island located between England and Ireland, and you can take a ferry to get there from Liverpool. I assume you can take one from Dublin too. Or you can fly there, and they run the craziest motorcycle race I've ever heard of, ever seen of. It's a road race, and there's a ring road that goes around the Isle of Man, and I forget, it's like 37 miles. It's one big loop, and it cuts through all these small villages, and it's just a 2-lane road, and it cuts through these bridges in these small villages that are all built up with stone, and there's rock walls lining both sides of this road, like old stone walls that farmers had put up hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and these motorcycles race around that thing. I think, if I can get the numbers right, I've watched it forever. It's something like the winning rider averages around this course like 131 miles per hour. It was just in recent years that they broke the 130 mile an hour average. But there's like hairpin turns on this too that go up onto a mountain, and there's parts where the riders are shifting down in a first or second gear to do these hairpin turns. So they regularly hit speeds in the straightaways of over 200 miles an hour. And people you just kind of like come to the edges of these rock walls and you hang out in people's yards and their gardens, as they call them in England, in the United Kingdom. Isle of Man technically isn't part of England or Ireland, but somehow is involved in them. They have a deal with England, I think, to provide military defense should they need it, but it's also some crazy tax haven. But these people, like, you can just line up right on a rock wall and you can lean over the wall. You could reach out and touch these motorcyclists as they come by at 200 miles an hour, and it's fucking insane. And I went to the Isle of Man race in, I guess it must have been, it was 2012, I think. It might have been 2011. I'm pretty sure it was 2012. It really doesn't matter, but my Bee Gees band was playing. I used to be in a heavy metal tribute to the Bee Gees called Tragedy, and I would do all the interviews for the band, which would probably come as no surprise to anybody because I love talking and I'm good at it and I'm good at hyping things up. So I was doing a round of interviews for our UK tour. We did 7 UK tours while I was in the band, and they were pretty successful. We were more popular in the United Kingdom than we were in America. And we could play 3 weeks straight and play every night of the week and still do 400 or 500, 600 people. Like even on a Monday night in like Sheffield or something like that, we'd get 400 people out. It's pretty wild. And we got a lot of press over there. Like for whatever reason, the press took to us there in a way they didn't in America. And the people really took to us too. And I found that in America, the people who came to see us were mostly like late 20s into their 50s. Whereas in the United Kingdom, we would get 10, 12-year-olds right up against the barricades, singing along to every word. And I kind of attributed that to, there's a different feeling with music in the United Kingdom than there is in America. In America, the music your parents listen to is like old person music and you're not into it. But what I found in the United Kingdom from spending a lot of time there, talking to people about it was that, like, generations would bond over music. So the kids there have a much bigger appreciation for the history of music. Like, there's plenty of people now, kids who are 17, 18, 19, who are like, the Beatles? What? Even Michael Jackson? Huh? Who's that guy? Like, it's a much more now culture here, I guess. So, um, anyway, I was doing this interview with a woman named Rachel Clegg, and she was a reporter for a newspaper in Sheffield, oddly enough, a town I just mentioned. And she did this whole interview with me, and at the end, she was like, "Man, you make your band sound so much fun. Like, I really wish I could come see you play, but I won't be able to." And I was like, "What are you? You're writing a story about us coming to your town, and you're not going to see us play?" And she was like, "I'd love to, but I'm going on a family vacation. It's something we do every year, and it just happens to fall in the time you're going to be over here. So I'm not going to be able to make it to the show." And I was like, "Where are you going?" She was like, "Oh, the Isle of Man." And I was like, "Oh, interesting. What are you going there for?" And she was like, "The TT race." And I was like, "Oh my God, wait, what are the dates of the TT race?" And she told me, and I was like, "Oh my God, you go to that?" And she's like, "Yeah, we go every year as a family. It's like a big thing that we do." And I was like, okay, like, so what are the exact dates?" And then she told me, and I was like, "Oh my God, when we end our tour, the races are gonna be happening." Because it's a whole like 2.5 or 3 week thing, and there's all practice days and trial laps to see who's gonna get the pole position and blah blah, that kind of stuff. And then there's like 7 to 10 days, I think, of actual races, and they race tons of different classes of motorcycles. So it just, and they take a day off between most races, to schedule for a rain day. Because if it rains too much, if it rains a little, they still do the race. If it rains too much, then they'll cancel the races and move them to the next day. So they stagger them out over the course of time, and people just come. Tons. It's a happening around Europe, and a lot of people take their motorcycles onto the ferry from Liverpool, and then will take them to the Isle of Man. And then what happens is they close the road down for the race, but then they open it back up because it's the only way for people to get around the island. And the race will typically last like 45 minutes or an hour or something like that. And then they'll open the road back up, and for a few hours, people go about their business for the day, and then they'll close it again and then have another race. And what typically happens is a lot of these knuckleheads who bring their motorcycles over, they ride the course like maniacs, and we'll get to that a little more later. But seems like a sensible thing to do, right? No, not unless you're a professionally trained racer. And as a matter of fact, most professional racers that race in the MotoGP, which is like, that's the equivalent to NASCAR or Formula One for auto racing. MotoGP is all the biggest riders in the world do their motorcycle racing, and that's really big in Europe and Asia. It hasn't really caught on in America, even though they do a couple of races. They do one down in Austin, and I think they do one in California at a track called Laguna Niguel. But for the most part, that takes place in Europe, and they do, I think, a race or two in South America, and they do a bunch in Asia. But the MotoGP riders have it specifically in their contract that they're not allowed to ride the Isle of Man race because it's too dangerous. And they averaged at, I don't know what the average is, but it's over 1 death per year for racers. Like, some years 2 people, 3 people die in the race, and sometimes nobody does, but the average is over 1. And there's no official statistic for how many spectators die. And I'm not talking about people who get, like, the bike crashes into them, because most of these people are protected behind rock walls that I talked about. But when they open the roads to the punters, as they call them in England, which just means regular people, the punters who all showed up on their motorcycles then go and race around the course as though they were in the fucking racetrack, and a bunch of people end up dying from that. And I guess the race just makes enough money, and the Isle of Man is like somewhat lawless, and they're just like, well, that's kind of the cost of doing business. I should point out too that the Isle of Man is the place where the 3 main Bee Gees brothers were born. That would be Barry, Robin, and Maurice. Morris, spelled like Maurice, pronounced Morris. Then Andy Gibb. Andy Gibb was born in England after, I think, the parents moved to Manchester, and that's where Andy was born. He was a lot younger. He was what they would call the accident Bee Gee, or brother Gibb. So Rachel explains to me like what the dates are of this, and I was like, can I come? Like, oh my God, it's going to match up with right at the end of our tour. There's going to be a few more days of racing. And what I would do when I was in tragedy, whenever we would go for a tour of the UK, I would fly in a few days early and then I would fly out a few days late, and the band would pay for all of our plane tickets. And most of the guys in the band wanted to come over, play the shows, then leave again. Always be like one day off before a tour, one day off after a tour. But I would always schedule 3 or 4 or 5 days, as much time as I could, and I would let the band pay for my ticket. I was like, if the band's paying for my ticket to get to London, then I can find cheap flights to anywhere else I want to go. And I went all over the place during that time. I went to Copenhagen, Barcelona, Paris, Amsterdam, Czech Republic, um, Spain, which was Barcelona, but also the south of Spain, Sevilla, which is looks like Seville. But I would always try to take a trip and add it on, like while I'm already over there. Once I went to Portmeirion, which is in North Wales, which is the seaside village. That was where the TV show The Prisoner was filmed, which is I had always been dying to go see that place. And Portmeirion is like you got to get to Liverpool, then you got to take like a 4 hour train ride from there, and then you got to take a taxi, and it's like pretty far out of the way. But I managed to do that once after a tour. Um, but for this tour, I didn't have a plan yet. Not oftentimes I wouldn't have a plan. I'd go over there. I'd usually hang out in London for a few days to acclimate to the time, hang out with friends I had over there. And then it was always when the tour ended, the day after the tour ended, most of the band would hang out in London for a day. I would wake up the next morning and fly to somewhere. Like the bus would always take us back to London, deposit us at a hotel after the last gig, and then I would always like just look at the flight apps and cheap flights. There's an airline called EasyJet over there and another called Ryanair that operate tons of cheap flights out of London and the rest of Europe. So I would always wait till the last minute, and then I would just pick where I was going to go basically based on what a cheap flight and destination was. And in fact, one year when I was over there, it was December it was January, and we were finishing our tour. And the night we finished our tour, we were in what is that place? The Brickyard in Carlisle, England. And that night after the show, after getting a blowjob in the bathroom, I went into the dressing room and I opened up my laptop and I was like, where am I gonna go? And I had come up with the two cheapest flights, and I was trying to schedule them so they would like leave earliest the next morning from London and get back as close to the time as my return flight to New York would be. And the two cheapest options I found were Cairo and Copenhagen. And I ended up flipping a coin, and it sent me to Copenhagen, and which was you don't go to Copenhagen in January. That's a terrible idea. But I didn't know that. But I remember I got there, checked into the hotel, had a bunch of drinks, went out and found a bar. Actually, some people that I met at that bar were still friends to this day. And I woke up the next morning and I went down to the hotel lobby and I was like, Copenhagen is famous for its bike lanes and how much bicycling there is over there. And I said to the woman at the front desk of the hotel, like, I want to go on a bicycle tour. And she was like, what? And I was like, I want to go on a bicycle tour. Are there any bicycle tours? And she's like, no, there's no bicycle tours. That's because that's a Danish accent. But she was like, yeah, there's no bicycle tours. There's not much of anything going on. What are you doing in Copenhagen? And I was like, I'm here on vacation. And she was like, why are you here on vacation in January? And I was like, well, because I was in England and my tour ended. I play in a band. I decided to come to Copenhagen for a few days. And she's like, well, there's nothing to do here. Everything that's sort of touristy is shut down. Everybody who works in the tourism business here, they go somewhere south. A lot of them go to Southeast Asia and work the winters down there when everyone from here is trying to escape. So yeah, there's nothing going on. And I was like, well, is there like a tourism office? And she was like, well, yeah, but you're not going to find much luck there. So I went to the tourism office and I got the same routine. They were like, what are you even doing here? And so there wasn't much to do. I went to the design museum, and then I went to this place up there called Christiania, which Christiania is a section of Copenhagen that seceded. Basically, they said, we don't obey by your laws anymore. And it was just one huge squat. And there were like dogs running around, like not rabid dogs, but just stray dogs running around, and people having fires and trash cans. And the whole thing was that, like, the idea, it was like the Amsterdam of Copenhagen, and you could buy weed and hash there. And I must have bought some. I'm sure I did. But I wasn't much of a weed smoker. Um, so I'm sure I did. I kind of remember now, a shady dude, and there was graffiti everywhere. But I was just drinking beers and stuff and just talking to people and hanging out. So I must have bought some weed just to say I bought weed in Christiana. Um, and I went to some churches, and there really honestly wasn't much to do. Even a lot of the restaurants and bars were closed. But anyway, so I would always have 3 or 4 days at the end of a tour scheduled. So I talked with Rachel and timed out, and I was like, all right, I'm going to buy a ticket for the day after our show. And I was like, are there still tickets available to the races? And she just started laughing, and she's like, well, you don't really buy tickets. You can buy tickets for the grandstand, and you'll be at the beginning of the race, which is the starting line and the finish line. But there's not much to see. The bikes just sort of take off, and then it's a long straightaway. So if you're at the grandstand, the bikes are just going to go zoom, 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 and just go by you, and you're not going to know much of what's happening. She's like, what really happens is like you kind of got to know somebody. And you just go into people's yards, and then if you know your way around the island, you can go watch the first bit of the race from this place. Then you can take some back roads that don't cross the main road, and then get to another viewing spot. But there's no, just like with Formula One and MotoGP, like NASCAR, you kind of go sit and you can see the whole track in one big vision. So you can understand who's winning and who's losing and who's passing people. But in these other longer races where the tracks are much longer and winding, you don't really see anything. Like, I guess it's sort of like Le Mans in France, where if you saw the movie Ford versus Ferrari, it's kind of like that. Like, so the people in the grandstands are just seeing cars crossing the starting line again, doing another lap. Uh, so I was like, oh man, like, do you think, could I meet up with you and your family and maybe spend a day or two checking out the races with you? And she was like, well, yeah, you seem cool. And then it turned out that she was friends with another friend of mine who was going over there for the races. And we didn't find that out for a couple more weeks. And I guess she told one of her friends, she was like, oh, Duff, this mate Jake that I interviewed from Tragedy, he's gonna come join us. And Duff was like, no fucking way, I know that guy. And he had actually been our PR rep for earlier tours, and that was pretty wild. So then I was like, he gave her the okay too, and was like, yeah, he's not a fucking maniac, or he is, but like he's the genial kind of maniac. So I finally got there, and so what happened was our tour ended, and I went to the airport. It was London Stansted, and I flew into the Isle of Man. And the way it was happening was, I think my flight was landing at like 10:30 a.m. And there was a race that was starting at 10, so should have been going to 11. So I paid like an extra £20 for a seat at the front of the plane because I wanted to be the first guy off the plane, sprint to a taxi, and that's what happened. I got off the plane. The plane landed actually a couple minutes early. I got off the plane, fucking sprinted down the jetway, ran through the airport, got the first taxi I could, and I was like, hey, I'm here for the races. I know there's a race going on right now, so just take me to whatever the closest point is. I was like, eventually I have to get to the paddock, the paddock is the word for like the starting line and where all the people prep their bikes and everything. I was like, eventually I'll get to the paddock. I'm going to meet up with some friends there, but I just want to catch whatever I can of the race that's going on right now. And the guy just laughed, and he's like, oh, mate, there's been a delay. Yeah, the race isn't happening right now. It's not starting till 1 o'clock, so you got plenty of time. And I was like, well, what happened? And he's like, there was an accident. One of the tourists actually crashed his motorcycle, and that's a wrap on him. He passed away, but there's motorcycle debris, and his body is littered all over the road, so it's going to take the cleanup crew a little while to clean it up and get his blood off the street so they can start the race. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. That's the best news I've heard all day. The guy was like, what the fuck is wrong with you? And I was like, well, poor guy, you know what I mean? But at least he died doing what he loved, and like now I don't have to miss a race. I'm going to get to see both races in their entirety today. So take me to the paddock. And I got to the paddock, and I ended up hooking up with Rachel, and Duff was there, and her whole family was there, her dad was there, and we were all like shooting the shit, and Rachel had gotten me a paddock pass, and I got to go around and look at all the motorcycles that they were prepping for this race. And there was who was one of the racers? His name was Guy something. I can't think of his last name, but I got to see him. I got to see him like right up close. He was just like sitting next to his bike and like had his head in his hands. It was almost like meditating in his full leather race suit. I wish I could remember his name. And then there was another guy, John McGuinness, who's the winningest rider of all time in the TT. Guy has sadly never won. They made a movie. I can't recommend this movie highly enough, by the way. It's called Closer to the Edge or Beyond the Edge. Fuck. You Google either of those. Google Isle of Man, Closer to the Edge, or Beyond the Edge. They made a movie in full IMAX. You can, I don't know if it's streamable. I know you can rent it. Last time I checked, it was hard to find, but you can Google it and you put it in YouTube. It tells the story of a whole season. And Guy Martin, that's his last name. They kind of followed him around hoping he would finally win a race, but he didn't. He didn't win that year, and as far as I know, he still hasn't won one of these races, but he's super popular, and he's just kind of nuts. He looks a little like Wolverine from X-Men. And I gotta tell you, all these guys who race in these things are nuts, because there's not much money to be won. So they have to make a living doing whatever they can to finance their racing. And they get a couple of sponsors, but like most of the big name sponsors don't want anything to do with this either, because so many people die in this race. And it's not a good look if you're sponsoring a rider who dies in a motorcycle crash. But they had all this footage of Guy Martin like working. He worked on like big rig trucks. They've been working in the garage and twisting wrenches and stuff and just talking about the insanity of the race. And they followed John McGuinness for a while, and he's won on like every different class of bike. That guy's just nuts. He's like in his late 40s now. I think he must have been in his like early 40s then, which was old for these kind of riders. So he's probably in his 50s now. Hope he's still alive. But yeah, all these guys are just fucking maniacs, and they're just addicted to the rush, and they're like all exceptional riders. One of the things I find most curious is they send these guys off at intervals, so it's not like everybody doesn't just start at once. So they send these guys off at like 1 minute intervals. The idea being that they want to give people space because it's not a racetrack; it's just a closed course. And you don't really want to be passing people and getting involved in passing moves in turns where you're going, 150, 180, 200 plus miles an hour. But it happens, right? A rider's slow, another rider catches up to him, and then he's got to pass him. But one of the things I found most interesting is that they judge you based on your total time from when you started to when you finished. I think it's 3 laps, 3 37-mile laps, but they judge you based on when you like your total time. And these guys are all so fucking good at this that their total time after going well over 100 miles in this crazy course, like their total times, the winner and loser are differentiated by sometimes a matter of just mere seconds. And you're like, well, how can everybody be that good? And I ended up finding that out. But before that, so I saw all these guys in the paddock, and then eventually they're calling that the race is going to start. So Rachel and her dad and Duff and me and the mom and brother and a brother's wife, we all just pile into a couple of cars, and we ended up going to this guy's house where it was a good spot to watch because it was a spot we lined up against the rock wall, and the bikers were coming from the right, and they were coming down a hill, and they were in a downhill mode when they passed us, and then it flattened out just for a little bit and then went back uphill, and then it turned to the right again, and the bikes would disappear. And everyone's listening on their radio, like an FM transistor radio, and they're broadcasting the notices of the race, and they have a guy doing commentary, a couple of guys that are telling you who's in the lead and who's, this guy passed this mile marker at this time, and okay, well, this guy's gaining on him as far as the times go and all that. And so we knew the race had started, and they're like, okay, it's just like 3 minutes until they get to us, and everybody like took their place against the rock wall. And Rachel's dad, Noel Clegg was his name, he yelled out to everybody, It's this guy. This guy's here from America. He's from America. It's his first time. He's never been in the TT. Everybody just moved aside and pushed me right against the rock wall. We're just in this dude's front yard, by the way, and they let me get right against the rock wall, and they were very specific. Do not put your arms over the wall. The bikes are going to come so close because of the way the road was curved in that one area. Like, they were going to be on the inside of the turn, and they were going to be zipping by us. And holy fucking shit. These guys, if you do find my YouTube channel, if you're watching on this YouTube channel right now, because I'm live on video here, everybody. If you're watching, go into my channel and scroll back to like 2011 or something, and you'll see some of the videos I took of this. It's indescribable otherwise. And if you're not watching on video, just go to YouTube if you're just listening to this podcast and just type in Isle of Man TT and just watch whatever highlights. I actually, just this afternoon, I watched the 25 worst crashes. I didn't make it through the whole thing. It was only 3.5 minutes, but I was like, I don't need to see that. In that movie, by the way, Beyond the Edge, Closer to the Edge, whichever it's called. In that movie, there's a crazy crash. This guy, Connor Cummins, his bike just kind of wiggles out from under him, and he's on one of the higher levels of the track, meaning the roadway, where he's up on the top of a mountain, and the bike wiggles out, the back wheel just starts squirming, and dude falls off his motorcycle and then tumbles down a hill, and you see his body. He's going like 150 plus miles an hour, and his body just tumbles over and over and over. And that's one of the sort of defining moments of that film. And then they interview the guy, and he's like, the next year he's back at it, and he's like, well, yeah, I want to win the race, you know? Yeah, it was terrible. I was in the hospital with broken back and this and that, but like, yeah, I'm back. And Connor Cummins, man, that guy's a motherfucker. Like, inhuman, the crashes some of these guys survive, and also, obviously, some of them they don't. But they pushed me right up against this rock wall, and dude, these guys came by so fucking fast. You could barely follow them with your eyes. And the first few times they came by, they just whizzed by. And I literally, if I had just reached my arm all the way out, I would have been able to grab one of these guys. Well, not grab him, but I would have, if he was stopped in that position where he came by, I could have grabbed him, but it would have just ripped my arm off. These guys, and I can't tell you how crazy it is to feel that a bike, a moving object, come past you at that fucking speed and that close, just like 2 feet away or less, just fucking, you're like, holy shit. And then we're just like, the first round of guys come by, and then there's a pause for a while, and then, you know, then there's like once a minute another guy comes by, but then the first few of all the riders have come by, so then there's a pause for another 10 minutes. And then everyone's listening on the radio, and oh, this guy crashed on this turn, or oh, this one passed that one on that turn, and everyone's getting excited. Meanwhile, directly across the street from where I was, just on the other side of the 2-lane road, there was a house that had a bleacher grandstand set up in their front yard. And apparently a lot of people do that, almost like Wrigley Field has in Chicago, where they have the really low wall, so that people set up bleachers on top of their apartment buildings and on top of the bars, and people come over and watch the game. They had setups like that you can pay to come to this person's house and sit on their land and watch the TT race. Or a lot of people just set it up so they can invite their friends over and stuff and give them good ways to watch these races. But we hadn't paid. We were just in you know, Rachel and her dad Noel's garden, their friend's garden. So we're watching from in there. And then at one point, Noel taps me on the shoulder, and he's like, you see that guy back there? You know who that is? And I was like, oh, no, who's that? Just some old dude that, like, I noticed people were, like, talking to him and shaking his hand and stuff. I just figured he was the guy who owned the house. But Noel was like, that's Jackie Stewart. And I was like, get the fuck out of here. Jackie Stewart is, like, one of the winningest Formula One drivers of all time. He's like the Michael Jordan of Formula One. And I'm like, that's not, holy shit, I'm watching this fucking TT race in the same yard as Jackie Stewart. Like, how fucking cool is that? All because of this stupid Bee Gees band that I was in. And after the first race, I think, that afternoon, the first race happened, came and went, and then we all just hung out in that garden for a while. And then we were drinking beer, and the guy had a huge spread of food. Turns out it was not Jackie Stewart's house, by the way. I was just wrong thinking that people were shaking his hand because he was the owner of the house. But, like, what did I know? So we just hung out there, and there was a couple hours between races, and I think we went back to the paddock that afternoon, looked at the guys' bikes, and like just check things out some more. And then the second race of the day was going to start. We're drinking beer, of course, during this whole time. The second race of the day was going to start, and we ended up going back to that same garden and watched the first bunch of people pass on that race, and then Noel put us all in his car, and he wound away through these dirt roads and stuff, and I don't know where. We came out to a whole different place and a whole different vantage point. He parked the car on some dirt road, and we had to hike up a big, like, bluff, I guess, so to speak. We got to the top of the bluff, and there we were, like, right on another rock wall, and this time the guys were coming from the left and passing us and disappearing over to the right, as opposed to the other way around. And oh man, it was just such a fucking incredible experience. And then that night, so we all go back to the paddocks that night after the second race, and we go back there, and they're like giving trophies to the winners, and we're like, I can't believe I have this all access pass to this race. This is just fucking incredible. And then at some point in the day, I was talking to Noel, and I was like, how do you know so much about this? And he said, Rachel had, I don't know how she fucking forgot to inform me of this, but it was earlier in the day that I was like, how do you know so much about it? Why do you come every year and whatever? And he was like, well, I used to race in this. I raced for 35 straight years. And he's like, well, minus that 1 year where I had a broken back and I had to take a year off. But he was like, Noel Clegg was like a real fucking racer, like a real TT racer. And I was like, holy, wow, you did this? And of course, I was just like pounding him all day with questions. But I was trying to be like, I was trying to like ramp it in a little, and be like, I don't want to fucking totally kill this guy. But I had so many questions about it because I've been buying DVDs of the TT race and watching YouTube clips and stuff for years. And even before that, reading about it in motorcycle magazines, and always just been like, how is this race legal? How does it exist? You know what I mean? I'm going to back up just for a minute, too. The day before I had gotten there, another guy had crashed, a tourist, and had crashed. And I guess he came around a corner over a hill and hadn't noticed that there was a dump truck, not a dump truck, but a garbage truck that was doing the garbage rounds, and the truck stopped. The guy got off the back and picked up the trash can and went to throw it in. And the dude came over this hill, didn't see it there. Guy was doing 100 and something miles an hour. Crashed his motorcycle into the back of the garbage truck. And him and the motorcycle all flipped into the truck. And the guy who was telling me the story, like, oh, you should have seen what happened yesterday. And I was like, oh man, that must have delayed the races by forever, huh? And the guy just laughed and was like, no, it's just the easiest cleanup ever. I mean, the guy's body and the bike went right into the fucking back of the garbage truck. So that was a wrap on that. There was nothing to clean up. And I was like, it's so amazing how cavalier everybody's attitudes is towards death in a race like this, because really, like, it just happens so frequently that everybody's just like, it's just part of what happens, And so then that day of the first day of the racing, it was starting to get dark, and I noticed that there was something going on, and Noel was talking to his wife and talking to his daughter, and Duff by that point had retired to go to like some hotel and have drinks. And Noel was talking to his wife and daughter, and they were like, I don't know. And they kept looking over at me, and I'm like, what are they looking at me for? And then Noel came over and he's like, do you want me to take you on a tour of the course? And I was like, what? Huh? And he's like, come on, let's get in the car. I'm gonna drive you around the course, and I'm gonna show you the whole route of the course. We're gonna drive the actual Isle of Man TT course. And I was like, oh my God, are you fucking kidding me? Like, yes, please. And then Rachel came along with us, and I sat in the car. I sat shotgun. Noel was driving. Rachel was in the back seat, which she spent most of the tour hiding in the back seat because she was so fucking scared. Just not because he was driving super fast. He was driving moderately fast, but I never felt dangerous. But he was telling all the stories of his years from being in the races, and she would get freaked out when we would come up to certain turns that her dad had crashed on, and she would hide in the back seat and kind of cower. And I was like, man, this is fucking something else. But at a certain point, I like pulled my phone out and I started recording it surreptitiously, and I just kind of like held it in front of me and to the side. I don't know if he ever noticed I was recording. If he did, he didn't say anything. But that too is buried on my YouTube page from back then, and I think it's split up into 2 different videos. But dude, you'll have to check that out because you can hear him talking to me the whole time. And he just kept pointing every little thing out about the course. And like, he's telling me, okay, coming into this turn, you're in 3rd gear. You want to hit the brakes right here. And he was pointing things out like, you see that tree there? That's where I know, like, that's where you start applying the brakes. That's where you start doing this. You see that rock wall? That's when you know to accelerate again coming out of a turn. Like, all of these guys have these little markers in the course with knowing that tells them when to shift, when to brake, when to accelerate, when to do all these certain little things. And I guess that's part of the way that these guys the winners end up just within seconds of the 2nd place and 3rd place guys. Like, it comes down to that much of a thing. And this dude just took me around the whole way. And it was such a fucking blessing, I guess, really. And just such a mind-blowing evening to be riding around it with this guy, and just to have a guy who raced in this race so many times explain it all to me. And I gotta say, most of these guys race in different classes, so he raced it for 35 years or something, but you've been around that track between practice laps, trial laps, and actual races. couple dozen times per year. So this guy literally knew this like the back of his hand. And I just got that whole rundown, and I'm so glad I preserved it on video. And like, I've never did anything to promote it, but I titled it well, and it's like whatever. It's got a couple, like hundreds of views, if not over 1,000 or something. It's just people who've searched for this guy's name and Isle of Man TT or whatever. Because not every video I post gets a lot of people looking at it. Obviously, like only if I happen to capture something cool. So yeah, I'd highly recommend checking that out. But definitely check out the movie if you want to see a documentary that really explains the race and explains the ins and outs of the riders and the mental state that they're in and what they're going through while it's all happening. Then I'd highly recommend checking out the Closer to the Edge documentary, Beyond the Edge. I think it's Closer to the Edge. The more I say it, the more that sounds right. But highly recommend checking out that documentary. And if you're a motorcyclist and you know about shifting gears and stuff like that, then you definitely want to seek out that video on my YouTube page about Noel Clegg giving me the tour around. That's gonna blow your fucking mind. And yeah, otherwise, just if you don't want to watch a whole movie, just go to type in the Isle of Man TT. That's ISLE, Isle of Man TT, and then to have my mind more sufficiently blown, he at a certain point he pulled up to this little like convenience store at some point along the track, and I was like, "What's this?" And he's like, "I think you want to go inside here." And I was like, "What's this?" And he's like, "This is the house where the Bee Gees were born." And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "This is the house where they were born. Like, there wasn't a hospital anywhere close when they were growing up. This is literally the house that they were born in. The parents ran, this is the post office, it's a general store, and the parents lived upstairs, and the boys were actually born inside of this house." And, I was like, "What? Oh my God, get out of here." So I went inside, and there was this, like, Indian guy running it, and I was like, "This is the place where the Bee Gees were born." And he just kind of rolled his eyes, and he was like, "Uh-huh." And I bought like a couple of postcards that said Isle of Man, and there was one that said Home of the PGs that I've since lost. But I was just so excited, and I just remember the Indian dude who ran it just like was so not excited that I was excited. Like, I guess this had happened enough times. But I even said, well, a lot of people come in here, and it was like, for this, and every now and then, like, I don't think it's a place. I don't think Bee Gees fans typically make pilgrimages to the Isle of Man, and when they do, I don't know that they typically even know where to go to find the house that they grew up in. But Noel Clegg knew that, and he treated me to that, and for that, I am forever grateful. I'm also forever grateful to Rachel Clegg for writing a great story about tragedy that sold out our show at the Sheffield O2 Academy on that run, and of course, even more so, grateful to her and to my old boy Duff Batty. Former PR agent for tragedy, and just grateful to her for, like, had I never done that interview, I wouldn't have even, I don't know that it would have registered to me that that's when the Isle of Man was happening and that it was a possibility to go to. I had never even considered actually going to that race before. It never even, like, I knew it existed, but it never even stuck out of my mind as like a possibility for whatever reason. But I'm so glad I did, and I gotta tell you, like, you talk to motorcycle guys, oh, this, that, yeah. I don't like talking to motorcycle guys for the most part. Like, I pull my bike up somewhere, and some guy, like, guys who don't ride motorcycles just always have something stupid to say to you about your motorcycle. They want to ask you questions. What size engine is that, bro? What's that, like 1,000 cc's? Like, no, it's a 1,200 cc. That's a whole lot of motor. You can handle that? It's like, dude, just shut up, you know? But when I do get involved in talking to motorcycle guys, like, when I want to let them know what the fuck is up, I'm like, "Oh yeah, I've been to the Isle of Man." You know what I mean? You work that in somehow, and they're like, "What the fuck? Oh my God, how was it?" Like, it's one of those that, like, it's not even like going to the Super Bowl. It's just like, not, a lot of people go, but not a lot of people. Like, it's not like a NASCAR race where 100,000 people go. It's certainly not that much, because there's the grandstands only hold like a couple thousand people, so everybody else just has to kind of like find their own way, and like you got to figure out where you're gonna go watch from. It's not just something you buy a ticket to. You need some inside information, and obviously the proliferation of information flow and the internet. It's probably way easier to go now than it was obviously in the 70s, 80s, 90s, or even literally 100 years ago. But even back then in 2011 or 12 or whatever, I just never thought to Google like how to go to the Isle of Man race. So uh, that was fucking lovely. And I bring that up because it's supposed to be, it's usually the end of May and the beginning of June, and I googled it today, and it's been canceled because of COVID, so it's not happening. And I'm pretty sure they did run it last year. I know they ran it last year because I actually watched some of the races last year. So I think this is probably the first year it's been canceled in forever. I would say probably since World War II, and I imagine it was canceled during then, but I'm not even sure. So it's a big deal if they cancel that race. So yeah, that's what brought that up for this week in this story, and that's gonna kind of wrap it up. If you saw a new podcast in your feed this week that came in the Tuesdays with Jakey feed, but was called Fridays with Friends, I interviewed Adam Bauer, proprietor, founder of Speakeasy Meats, who is, I guess, what you would call a sponsor of this podcast in a weird roundabout way. And I interviewed him all about him switching from being a booking agent and pivoting into starting a renegade sort of speakeasy meat company during COVID. And we talk plenty about, I ask him a lot of questions. I don't know much about cooking or meat or how things are made and butchered and chopped and what part of meat comes from what part of the cow. So we got into a lot of that. I asked him a lot of technical questions about, obviously his journey of starting a meat company and how he learned to smoke. But I asked him questions about how meat smoking works. If you don't know much about meat smoking and you're interested, I'd highly suggest checking that one out. That's part of a series now that's going to be Fridays with Friends. It'll appear in the Tuesdays with Jakey feed. You don't need to go subscribe to it. You just need to look in your feed in iTunes or, whatever they call it now, Apple Podcasts app or the Spotify app or Deezer Nuts, or I think it's available on Google Podcasts and Amazon Music and, probably Stitcher and where else? Like, who listen? What? Don't you just listen on iTunes and maybe Spotify? Like, what are all these other things doing? I don't know. I actually had to go in my podcast host and click all these things and submit different things to be carried by them. And I was like, man, at a certain point I gave up. There's some services were not carried by because I was like, how do I even figure this out? Now it's on YouTube. You know what I mean? So watch it on YouTube. Now you can see me. If you're looking at me now, I picked out my t-shirt for today. I wanted to wear my Nas t-shirt. Andrew Yang, who's running for mayor of New York City, I noticed the other day, the reporter asked him if he listened to rap music. He was doing some Zoom interview, and he's like, I listen to a lot of rap music, typically a lot in the 90s. And she was like, oh, what were you listening to? And he's like, a lot of Nas, a lot of Jay-Z. I'd say Jay-Z was my favorite. And she was like, cool, what's your favorite Jay-Z song? And dude was fucking stumped, man. What a fucking phony and a fraud. If people didn't know that already about this fucking clown, but that guy's just basically done nothing but embarrass himself. I remember he said he was taking the A train uptown to the Bronx. The A train doesn't go to the Bronx. It stops at 207th Street in Inwood, Manhattan. And people tried to come to his defense. Well, you take the A train, then you transfer to the B or the D at 145th Street, and then you can get to the Bronx. No, this motherfucker said, I'm taking the A train up to the Bronx. And then there was that other time where he was in a fucking Wegmans or some shit, and he's like, nothing matters to New York as much as bodegas. I mean, it wasn't really a Wegmans, but it was one of those, it was like a mini supermarket. You know those delis that are like delis on steroids? No New Yorker would call that a bodega, but he did. But to see him fucking squirm about, and he just kept saying, what's my favorite Jay-Z song? And kind of looking around, waiting for a staffer to whisper, Empire State of Mind, you fucking dickhead. But even if he had said Empire State of Mind, you'd still know that he's not really a Jay-Z fan, obviously, because he said he was listening to Jay-Z in the 90s. But it was just great to watch him squirm and man, I hope people don't vote for him. I don't even know who they should vote for because I'm not following closely, but I hope people do not vote for fucking Mr. Yang Gang. What a tool tard. But yeah, I'm wearing my a Nas t-shirt here today. When I say I really picked out my t-shirt, it's covered by the microphone, so I kind of got to turn to the side to show it. But when I say I spent a lot of time picking out my t-shirt, I mean I grabbed the one that was on the top of my t-shirt pile. But if you see behind me, you're looking at my art studio here. A few paintings in progress behind me. I had to record inside today because it was raining. I wanted to go outside, but hopefully next week I'll be back in the sunshine and the outdoor podcast. And until then, if you want to support this podcast, if you like it, you can go to speakeasymeats.com and use the discount code Jakey for 30% off your order, that's an incredibly generous discount code. And apparently it's only that much because originally he had made it for 25%, but apparently I kept saying 30%, so he just increased the discount. So I would say, like, not only if you want to support this podcast, because the more meat you order, the more meat Adam sends me. That's kind of our arrangement. He's not like paying me to talk about this shit, but it all started because I ordered a package of his meat to support a friend, and then I kept talking about it because there was so much meat that came in my package that I couldn't eat it all in 1 week. So 1 week I had the burnt ends and the monstrami brisket, which is Montreal smoked meat and pastrami, sort of dual type of brisket. And I ate that, and then I finished eating my brisket, and then there was also the chicken, and so I talked about that the next week, and then I was like, this motherfucker, I should get it. My listeners should get a discount code, and that's how that happened. But another way to support this podcast, if you want to, of course, is go to rocksoff.com, and then there's links there to our stores. There's our Big Cartel store where you can buy some of my original paintings if you should so desire, and also the Rocks Off coloring book and unicorn dolphin stickers and pins. And there's also a link to our Threadless store, which is all of our t-shirts and masks. Obviously, there's no more mask mandate pretty much anywhere. You still need to wear it on the subways, but if you want to wear a mask, there's a lot of goofy designs. Look through it. And man, you don't want to do any of that, don't worry about it. You don't have to buy anything. You just PayPal me, jake@rocksoft.com, or Venmo at jake-sufnerowski. But more than anything, a way you can support this podcast without spending a fucking nickel is give me some feedback. Hit me up on social media. You're not going to find me on Twitter for long because I'm canceling that. But I'm on, just fucking text me. You find me on social media or not. Who cares, right? Do you need someone new to follow? Probably not. But just text me, 917-443-7615. John Sanchez tracked down my number, sent me some amazing messages this week, and now I might see him in Boise in August. This podcast is about making connections. I'm hoping you feel connected to me. Let me feel connected to you. Let me know what you like or don't like about this podcast. You don't tell me what you don't like. If there's enough stuff you don't like, just stop listening. But tell me what you like about it. If there's a story that you've heard about me or heard that I've been through that you'd want me to talk about, just let me know, man. And really, if you have any advice questions, I really want to do an advice column on here. I really do. Like, you got relationship issues, I'll fix them for you, man. I'm a licensed therapist in the state of inebriation. So send me any, relationship questions, business questions, life questions. You need some life coaching? Hit me up, man. I'll do any of that shit. But I'll do the advice questions on here for free. You know what I mean? Just send me a message. Email me, jake@rocksoft.com. Text me, 917-443-7615. Or send me a postcard or a note to P.O. Box 4116, Macomb, Idaho. That's MCCALM, Idaho, 83638. And that's going to do it for another episode of Tuesdays with Jakey. If you're watching this on video, it's just going to end. But if you're listening to this, just stay tuned for just a moment more for the Tuesdays with Jakey theme song by Johnny Pacalolo. Peace. Holy fuck, 5.9 gigs.